Welcome to Gas-Shaped Light. I'm Alexander Tuschinski, the film's director, and I'm very excited how the film turned out. I started here with a bang, which was important to me in editing, because I realized if the film starts with just romantic scenes of the two of them walking and so on, and for 5 minutes there's no real conflict, people might believe it's a kitschy love movie and might switch it off. So in editing, as the film was almost ready, I decided to start it with these shots and with these sounds, with the two of them, with the weapons and so on, which we had shot for the fall sequence. The scene here was actually the very last day of filming in spring 2019. It was almost summer, and you see here they don't have the backpacks which they had in the initial walk. I originally thought I would start the film with a montage similar to the one in fall, but this time set in spring, where we see how the couple is getting along, getting to know each other. By the way, I was really proud of that zoom, how I managed to do it. I filmed it with this scene I filmed with the SLR photo camera, which didn't have a smooth zoom lens, so doing these zooms was quite a challenge, and following the two of them here with the camera was not that easy. I had found a location a few days before and had thought about this, how to film them against the background, and all these pans and zooms, how the camera pans away now and so on, this was all completely spontaneous. I never do storyboards. I sometimes think of certain shots beforehand, but when on set, I always decide spontaneously how to move the camera, and have all these ideas. So here, when they hugged, it was just spontaneous. Let's pan to the right and then, intercut it and so on. It was a beautiful process. And well, I had originally thought of starting this film with a little montage, with scenes of him helping her to learn for school, of them getting to know each other, kind of a counterpoint to the fall scene where we see this montage of them arguing and getting together, a romantic montage. But then I saw that it's not necessary that the film is stronger this way. By the way, this scene was one of the first interiors we shot in early 2019. I'll come to the details soon. But yeah, while editing, I realized I can just have the beginning like this. But that's the reason why they have a backpack in their initial walk. And when they run kissing, they don't have a backpack, because I thought this will be part of a big montage which takes place over various days and so on, so we didn't need that continuity. This scene, their first time in bed, is, again, we did the first days of filming in fall of 2018. Then, in early 2019, we did these interior scenes in their apartment, and this handwriting, I wrote it with a felt tip marker. In editing, I realized I want some special credits, I don't want them in a normal type font. So I wrote their names, Gas-Shaped Light, and the film by, and so on with felt tip marker, scanned it, made a negative image, and that's the credits. And the first days of filming were in fall of 2018. And then these scenes of them in bed and so on were done in early spring of 2019. And this is again the very last day of filming. We already filmed the sequence, in the park of them running and kissing that day. And then this. I love the camera angle. While walking to this location, I thought, let's do it this way, that she runs and they follow her with the camera. It has kind of a cinema verite feeling, which I really, really like. And this day of filming was again with the SLR photo camera, where I couldn't do smooth zooms and so on, and it was quite rushed. You can hear the dialogue so well. I mean, it was rushed. We rushed from one location to the other. The filming itself, I take care that it works well, but this day was a lot of time pressure. You can hear the dialogue so well. Above them, you can faintly see a little microphone that I placed there as an experiment, and it worked so well that it captured the audio. This is early summer of 2019, the last day of filming, and now we cut back to early spring of 2019 when we filmed the interiors. The film was based on a screenplay that I had written. By the way, these hats belonged to my late friend and mentor Hugo Niebeling, a very talented filmmaker. And, I put his hats into the scene, as a little homage, because he liked hats, I like hats, and I got his hats, so I put them in here. And this was spontaneous. Basically, in early spring of 2019, when we filmed this scene and all the other scenes inside the apartment, all these dialogue-heavy scenes, I had a screenplay. And we also improvised, as I always do in my films. I like to improvise based on screenplays or improvise fully. And here I thought, let's try this. And I used the handheld camera to give it more of a, behind the scenes feeling of a photo shoot. And we did this a few times from different angles. And here is a little joke. Philip starts, he gets the glasses, then she puts this blanket on him. He acted in my prior films, in Break Up, in Timeless, and one of the characters he plays is a guru called Silvermeshi. And I had these props from those films laying around, a cup with the Silvermeshi photo. Then I thought, let's do this as a little joke, as a reference to my prior films. Let's dress him up as the guru and show how they did that photo. I like these little interconnections of films. And this was filmed on a bigger camera with a nice zoom lens, and it was done with a very small budget. Basically, I had one lighting panel, to do the lighting, and use the camera, and behind this camera there was me operating the camera all by myself, and Julia Domendiak, who assisted and who did the audio, who recorded the audio on the boom microphone. And Teresa, the actress, she is an acting student. I think by now she has finished her studies by this time that I record the commentary. But, and this is, I think, one of the first film experiences. And we rehearsed these sequences thoroughly. I do this with all of my films. But this film had few comedic elements to it, so it was just dramatic scenes, rehearsing these dramatic scenes, which I think, is a different process in some regards. It was quite intense, and we did a lot of these interior scenes in 3 days in spring of 2019, and I'm really proud how it turned out. I remember there was a certain rush on those days, or let's say there was tight timing, there was a tight schedule, and we did rehearsals and then we shot the scenes. And I always like to do many camera angles, as I did here also. The style, though, is not quite as crazy in many scenes as in my other films, because of the subject matter. I wanted to make it more naturalistic. And I'm really proud, of these zooms. We had a beautiful zoom before in this scene too, when they talk in a long shot and then we zoom in. And see, for example, this scene, this was improvised. This isn't based on a screenplay. Because we had the prop cup. I think these 3 scenes, I think some of it was based on a screenplay, some was improvised that day, and that's the cup from Break Up and Timeless. And so basically filming was mostly in blocks. This scene was also in early 2019. I wanted to set it in summer, but it wasn't warm outside, so we couldn't film the summer. So I decided to do it in front of a black background, and this was a completely spontaneous idea. The dialogue was from a script. The first shots, they pretend to be walking in front of the black background, but it looked kind of weird. So I decided, no, let's do it like this. One shot for each line, and this was all improvised. And I thought, okay, let's do a zoom here, let's do a close-up of your eyes, let's do a close-up of your mouth. That was all, not pre-planned. I planned it on that morning. I remember we filmed in the morning, and they unpacked counters of these lemon popsicles, I think they're called. This scene, again, spring 2019, all these interior scenes, the opening, that was an idea I had that very day again. And I have the attitude, I like to put something special into each scene. I remember when we recorded the audio here, Julia was operating the boom microphone, and we found it all fascinating how closely you could hear the audio. And basically this scene, on that day, I already pre-planned it. I thought I will put jump cuts and then I'll speed it up. So this was all, pre-planned on that day, though. As always, it was improvised and pre-planned on the day of filming. Originally, I thought of shooting this scene in a more classic way, with close-ups of each. By the way, this montage masks a cut, because I combined 2 takes. I like the beginning of one take and the end of another. And I thought how to combine it, and then I thought, okay, put these shots of eyes. But originally I wanted to do this scene more classic, with the camera positioned by the door, doing a total view, and then close up here, close up there, and so on. But as I said, there was a certain rush to the filming, a tight schedule. I would have done it anyway, because I always like to do the scenes the way I like. But I thought, wait a second, it's going to be stronger and more relaxed on the set at the same time if we do it in a long take and not place the camera by the door, but place it outside the window, outside the kitchen window, filming inside. The posters here, all of my prior films, Cycle, Kreislauf, that film is an experimental film I did that I love. I think it's one of my favorites that I had done. And I had finished editing in October 2018 of Cycle, and it had its premiere in Santa Cruz around October 2018. And so I put the poster here onto the set. And as I said, it was a tiny crew. It was Julia holding the microphone and me behind the camera. That's it. And I lit it with one lighting panel, which, you can see where it was placed. This scene was a lot of rehearsal because I wanted to stage it like a theater stage where the 2 of them stand, so it looks interesting. We did 4 or 5 takes and we did thorough rehearsals. I told them, okay, you stand on this tile, you stand on that tile, then you hug from this, we see you on the side, and so on. And this montage here, I had the idea in editing. Basically, I had thought of filming various other scenes, but like this scene here, you see the 2 of them sitting on the sofa and hugging. This was the first take for the scene in summer. This on the sofa hugging was intended after their first time, that she says she has to leave quickly because her dad waits for her, and she claimed that she was with her friend Helen, so she couldn't postpone it. And this scene here was a complete improvisation. And during editing, I had thought of making a few scenes where we see that relationship starts to deteriorate. But the scheduling was not easy because, I had to coordinate the actors and so on. And then I realized I can do these montages from the scenes and moments not used in the other sequences. In the scene before, in this montage, we saw a shot of trees kind of turning. I filmed that on my phone spontaneously when laying on my back in a park one day, and I thought, wait, I can show the trees turning and put everything semi-transparent above it and so on. And this next montage again worked like that. This is all... So this was shot in spring 2019. This is a shot from the fall scene. These are some scenes that I shot. And this montage was spontaneous during editing. I wrote and composed the original soundtrack. See, this was a scene that we did in fall that I didn't use there, but I loved that shot. And for doing this montage, I just dove deeply into the unused shots. You see alternate angles, alternate shots. And this sequence with, where he discusses it with his friends, we shot that in, again, fall of 2018. I think this was the second block of scenes we did, in late 18. And it worked beautifully, and I like these jokes in the background. In the restaurant, this couple these 2 people start becoming a couple. With the car, they start beating each other up. And originally I had intended this to be placed after the scene where she steps in the shard and she's sitting there with the bandage around her foot. Then we see the dialogues, then we see the fall scenes. But I realized it isn't so... I love the transition of her foot in the bandage, and then cut, we see them walking. So for a while I thought I won't use this scene. Then I had the idea to make this montage of their relationship starting to deteriorate and overlay it with all these scenes and all this yelling and so on. which makes the scene work better. You see the two of them in the background running away while they fight and so on. Dominic here, I love his acting. He has acted in all of my feature films, or I think, yeah, in all of them. Menschenliebe, Breakup, Timeless, in Fetzenleben he appears, which I did after Gas-Shaped Light. He acts so well. This sequence turned out so strongly. And I love the lighting. The lighting is basically the lamp you see on the table. And I think I used the lighting panel, which looks like a computer display, but it's shining. It's not huge equipment. And I used that lightly, to light them. And again, this was a sequence, I thought how to do it. Should they talk in a park? Should she confront him and so on? And then I had the idea again, let's do it in front of a black background. I often do scenes in front of black backgrounds. As, I have some trial scenes in Breakup and Timeless. I have some scenes in Fetzenleben and so on. And I find it very strong. My short film Wojciech, a silent film, was shot in front of a black background. And originally, in my first work prints of this film, which ran, I love this zoom, it worked so well. I did it a few times, and to stop so closely to his eye, the camera I use has a 20 times zoom lens, so I can go from a far away shot to this very close up. Again, I don't pre-plan this. This is on the day while filming. I edit the films myself, often the night after filming, and I remember the main take. His acting that I liked best was the shot where you see him from further away sitting at the table. And I mainly used that, and then I used some close-ups of him from other takes. You see this shot, that's where I liked his acting most. So for the most important lines, in each take, actors act differently a little bit, and you have the best take often. This shot here, you see, when the camera pans up and she looks up in the perfect timing. Like, I didn't tell her to look up in that moment. I just filmed it and it happened like that. And I was so excited and happy on set. I felt this big excitement about how this shot turned out while filming it. And in the first work print, which ran only 30 minutes, I had removed certain scenes, the talks to his friends and so on. And it basically went from the kitchen to them running in the park, which is from the opening scene, but in the first work print I didn't use it. In the opening, the film started with them in bed, then we cut to them with the guitar where she's yelling at him, and it cuts directly to the interrogation, which worked, but it was too fragmented. Then I decided, no, I'll give the film its original structure. This screenplay, it's actually filmed for an upcoming feature film called Revolution. And in the middle, there is a sequence of the main protagonist, played by Philip, meeting a girl who's nice and friendly and so on. And Konstantin, who's played by me in that film, tells him, well, if you do everything right, you'll be with her forever, which kind of explains why he keeps trying. This scene was started in spring of 2019 on our 3-day block of interior scenes, and it was the last scene we shot that day. But because of the tight schedule, we could only film the first half. And then, I left the set like that, and they returned after a while to do the second half. So we filmed it until the moment she steps in glass, then cut, and we were a few days later filming the rest. And we did, this is according to my screenplay that I wrote, this dialogue. We did improvisation, and I did a little extended scene where they argue for 4 minutes more. And it's a great argument. They improvised so well, but I realize I can't put it in the film because it makes it overlong and tedious to watch if there's suddenly a long argument. That's a weird scene, but by itself it's wonderful, the acting. So I want to do an extended scene of this. And you see here again, I use a handheld camera very often to make the scene feel more intimate, as I thought. You see the slight movement. When I do handheld camera, I often keep it very, very steady, so you don't see it unless you really watch. I mean, you see it in some moments. But as always, and you can see how now she's just pointing her hand, she's no longer holding his. this isn't planned again. This was on the day I felt, oh, I have to pan down, I have to show her face and so on. And in editing, it looks so well. And here, the argument in the extended scene went for 4 minutes or so, and she yelled at him, why do you always talk to that woman in the metro train and not to the old man sitting there? And he goes, I talk to the old man too, he's nice, and but the woman is, and so on. But I cut that out. I kept it adhering to the dialogue that I had written. And basically, I kept expanding the script between the days of filming. The first day of filming in fall. By the way, on the right you can see this this cloth with the glitter. Wow. See, this is a while later. You see the lighting changes a tiny bit, and this special effect here. This is just plastic and fake blood. Julia did the effect. But this glittery cloth on the wall, which you can sometimes see, on the first sequence in bed, the first time, I did a shot where it starts with a face that's, put into this glittery cloth, and it pans down to them in bed, but I didn't put it fully in the film, only a tiny glimpse. And there's always posters for my films and so on, and here I intercut it to make it look more hectic. The soundtrack I wrote and performed, as I said, the original soundtrack, which you can hear over here also. While filming, I thought I will use Vivaldi's Four Seasons almost exclusively. See the special effect that Julia did, it looks scary and realistic. While filming, this didn't seem hectic at all, obviously. It's not a real wound or so. And so with the cinematography, with the shaking handheld camera. By the way, in the background where Philip is sitting, you can see DVDs of some of my films. And you can see some figures, some props that Roger Ball made. The artist I portray in my documentary Caligari in the Desert. These are Egyptian-style, tables, like little props he made for one of his films that he gave me as a gift, and they appear here in the background. And you see how well this works, this transition. We shot this before, This is all the 3-day block in early 2019 of these interiors. Again, you can see posters of my films. And it was a tight schedule, but I still wanted to do, many camera angles as I like to do and so on. But here, basically every camera angle you can see is the same perspective. The camera is on a tripod. I just zoomed in more or less, and then, it worked beautifully. And, I did various endings of the scene. One time the camera pans down to the silver meshi cup, but in editing I realized what a wonderful transition this is and how it shows how time has passed. These scenes in fall now, that's the last day, that's the first days of filming in October 2018. When they're walking here and so on. I remember, there wasn't a real screenplay for these days. I remember Julia had this red nose in her bag, for some reason she had it for some other event or whatever. And we came up with these scenes. I improvised. I told him, hey, you walk here, and hey, oh yeah, maybe we can put this red nose in it. And this is filmed handheld. And so basically in the beginning, I thought, let's improvise scenes of a relationship where they get along, where they argue, and so on. So everything here, set to this music, was filmed on the initial 3 days in fall of 2018. I remember I was really nervous that day, the first day of filming, because I hadn't been filming with actors for, a while. I had done my big feature film Timeless in 2014-15, and afterwards I had done documentaries, experimental films, I had done Wojciech, a silent film, and I had done a few days for Revolution, the upcoming feature film, but really I hadn't done filming with actors continuously for a while. So these 3 days were really exciting for me, and it worked well. This dialogue here, that's all made up. I told him, hey, let's talk about this topic and this, and let's improvise it. And we walked around on these 3 days, filming all these exterior shots and interior shots, like these apartment shots. That's all done in fall of 2018 on these 3 days. I believe it was late September, early October. I would have to look it up. And I'm happy how it worked. I edited this right afterwards. And in editing, I had the idea to use Vivaldi from Vivaldi's Four Seasons, the winter, and then I had the idea to have the seasons change in the film. And originally I wanted to put Vivaldi underneath the entire film, to have the spring, then summer, fall, winter. But I realized if I start the film with nature scenes and the first movement of Vivaldi's Spring, people watching it will just think this director is lazy and doesn't know music, because the Spring is a wonderful piece of music, the first movement, but it's been overused in films, so I didn't want to start it with that. So occasionally you hear something from Vivaldi's Four Seasons, but you also hear the original soundtrack, which I actually wrote and recorded quite a bit after filming. You know, I had edited to temporary soundtracks, used various soundtracks. Some scenes like this are clearly edited to the soundtrack. And then I had the idea for this theme on the piano, which you sometimes hear, and then I edited these montages to it, and the two of them running in the park to it. And so the soundtrack is a mix between an original score, written and performed by me, and Vivaldi. And I think it's a beautiful combination. And you see, I think this was the very first or very second day of filming. And I remember when I saw how they act and how this works, I was so excited. This shot here, you see where I'm zooming in so far away. Like, that was not easy to coordinate. We talked on the phone, and we have this intercut of them arguing, which I put there because I felt it looked stronger. This editing was just spontaneously after we filmed these 3 days. And the weapons I also shot on that day. It's kind of also an homage to my film Timeless, where there's so many weapons and the two of them arguing and so on. This we shot quite a bit afterwards. And I thought I will do it with a handheld camera, and I'm amazed how it worked out. Basically, I moved the camera deliberately very much to give it some dynamic, and we did it in a few takes, and the way she's yelling, she acts so convincingly. It's just amazing. I loved the interplay. You know, Philip, he didn't study acting. I believe he didn't study it. He just acts because it's fun in my films and so on. And, you know, it's wonderful. You know, he's a very, very talented actor, you know. And this was the first time he would act in a dramatic way in a film of mine. And Teresa, who studies acting, you know, their interplay was just wonderful. And again, all these zooms, all these pans, everything, how the camera moves, I did it spontaneously. The only thing I had thought about this scene was that I start running, you know, to intercut it with the end of the fall scene, which we shot a while before. That was very intense scenes. And now when he opens the door, she's standing in this white light. It looks like something pre-planned, but actually on that day, in the first take, he walks in and there's this bright white light, if I keep the camera on the same settings as, you know, near the entrance door. And it just looked marvelous and stunning. And I thought, wow, I'll keep it like this. And you see how tired he looks, you know, on that day. You know, when we filmed these sequences, these interior scenes in this big block later on, you know, in early 2019, he stayed with me for a few days, and I keep editing at night. So basically, he stayed awake with me to look at the editing, and it makes him look more tired in these scenes, and it's also acted. It's just wonderful. And this is how she seduces him again. Well, so these scenes are part of an upcoming feature film called Revolution that I actually wrote in 2010. And when I wrote Revolution, I thought that in the middle there is this tiny bit, so this runs 5 minutes, it shows how our relationship gets worse and, you know, breaks down and so on. And then I expanded it while filming these scenes. Here, I wanted to include a surrealist and weird scene with her parents. You know, where he meets her parents for the first time. And we see how the parents put her down in front of him, laugh about her, and then start putting him down. It would have been done in a very weird and surrealistic fashion. And maybe I'll reshoot it someday also, but I felt it works like this. But, you know, the parents would have talked about, you know, how they're gonna be a couple forever, they're so lovely, and then they mock him and mock her, and she's content with her parents mocking her. It would have been over the top and surrealistic and strange. So maybe I'll do that scene, but I felt this transition works stronger to make it kind of like a chamber piece, mostly with just the two protagonists. This is Thomas Gershon Wojciech, the silent film I did in 2017 from the poster. This shot here, we did, Philip and I, in winter 2018-19, when it had snowed, we took a train to a smaller town and we just filmed these scenes. We improvised so much. And I loved how this worked with the cars and so on. I had the big camera with me with a tripod and we walked through the snow and we filmed countless camera angles and improvised. And I edited it to this more poetic montage. You know, here Philip and I were alone also in winter 2018-19 filming these scenes. And it worked beautifully. In the snow, there was one shot which I didn't use in the film. There's a bench which is snowed in, and Philip with his arm, he just removes the snow and sits down, and he scratched his hand on a little stone or something. His hand started bleeding slightly in the snow, and it looked very poetic, and Philip and I were like, we have to film this. You know, his bleeding hand in the snow. It wasn't bad, but, you know, it wasn't that he was hurt badly. But I didn't put it in the film ultimately because it looked fake. The blood on his hand just looked fake, even though it was real. I mean, it was just a little blood. It was just a little scratch. It looked like some cheap fake blood, and both Philip and I were like, oh, this isn't looking convincing. Here, there was some timing that went on so perfectly when he puts down the phone and it just darkens, you know, in that moment. This here we shot, when we shot the scene of him talking to his friend in the restaurant. We also did a shot of him alone, and you saw a little cameo of Julia sitting at the side with her back to us, you know, in the beginning of that shot. Julia Domendiak, who assisted, you know, behind the scenes and who did the boom operation, who held the microphone, the boom microphone. And yeah, in Revolution, that film, in the screenplay, it was originally a short montage, more like the falls scene, where I thought in 5 minutes we see how a relationship turns from beautiful to sour. But when we were filming the falls scene, I realized we have to expand this, we have to make it longer, we have to add more scenes. And I went excited and kept expanding the screenplay to the film you now watch. And I'm not yet certain in the film Revolution if I'll keep the film as this or if I will shorten it and maybe make it a montage. It's now March of 2022 and I had done a few scenes for Revolution, but it's been postponed and I've done some other projects now. So let's see what Revolution will turn out like. This sequence was very, very strong. Yeah. But basically, after the last day of filming here, which was the summer scene, you know, the opening scene in the film, which is set in spring, but we filmed it in summer. After the last day of filming, I had thought, let's do a few scenes for this film in Paris. You know, Teresa had time. I said, let's go to Paris in the summer, but I think Philip's schedule was busy those days. And that's when I thought, hey, okay, I won't do scenes for this film in Paris, but let's do an entirely different film in Paris, which turned out to be Fetzenleben. And in Fetzenleben, I also used some shots that we shot for this film. But so basically, to me, this film is late 2018, early 2019. I did the editing, you know, quickly, but I finalized it, you know, over a while, and the film had its premiere in 2021. And I'm very happy how it turned out. Many people commented on it, and whenever someone watches it, we have these discussions about relationships, toxic relationships, and so on. And I'm happy about all the discussions this film creates, and I'm very, very happy how it turned out.